Hey guys, it's Nadia from LiaDia Designs and I'm back with another video. This one here is actually me a little bit different. This is going to be a troubleshooting video. I want to show you the process that I actually recommend to a lot of my followers when they've tried a tutorial that I have, especially if it's something like the flowers or the crackle effect, where they say that they follow directions exactly and they're just not getting the same result. And a lot of the times that is caused by the differences in product. So if they're using a different resin, if they're using different pigments, potentially if there's a temperature difference, if the atmosphere that they're working in is obviously different than the one I'm working in. There's a lot of factors that actually can affect results with resin. So, and then what I do, because obviously I can't, get to them to, see what it is that they're using, what I do is I recommend a test. So I'm going to kind of go through that with you guys today, so something that you can do to hopefully help you if you're finding that you're not getting the results of some tutorials that you're seeing. So this here is actually a piece I created somewhat recently, and it's using a technique that I've actually seen many artists use on Instagram. And it's really cool because it's a flower technique where you actually pipe the pigmented resin into clear resin. And it allows you to add so many layers, and you end up with a lot of really cool overlapping petals and some really neat effects. And I really wanted to try it to see if I could get that same effect. And again, I didn't watch any tutorials or anything like that. I just kind of winged it. So obviously, my first try may not work exactly as planned. So this is the back, and obviously the back looks pretty neat. You can kind of see it looked promising that things would work out. But when you actually flip it over to what should have been the front side of the piece, it looks like that. So now, because I've obviously done quite a bit of work with resin and flowers and things like that, I kind of know what the problem is that I have here. And based upon my knowledge of the resin I'm using, I kind of have an idea of what the issue is. But I won't know exactly for sure what the exact solution is unless I do some tests. And that's what I'm going to do today and show you the process that I use. And again, this is the same process that I recommend to my followers. So obviously, if this is something that is helpful to you, it allows you to kind of not use too much resin, but then, be able to test it, and then, hopefully get you, a solution quickly so that you can get on your way to making the pieces that you want to make. All right, so I'm going to walk you through the process here so that you kind of have an idea of what I'm going to be doing, and then I'm going to just kind of switch over into a time lapse so that you actually can see. Obviously, you'll kind of get an idea of what the technique is just by watching, but I'm sure many of you have seen it, especially if you're on Instagram or TikTok. It's all over. So it's a very common technique that's being used right now. And again, it's just a matter of me figuring out how I can get it to work for me with the resin and the pigments that I'm using. So based upon looking at what the result is I got here, my assumption is that my resin wasn't thick enough at the time of when I added the pigments to it, because the pigments basically, just dropped straight down to the bottom and just sat down there. Instead of kind of getting suspended within the resin, it just completely just dropped straight down. And that happens sometimes when there's like extra resin. Sometimes it'll just kind of drop if it's a bit heavy, and that's why these ones work, because I used the technique for this one's a lot thinner, so that's why I didn't have that problem with these ones. But for this technique, because there's more pigment that's being dropped into the resin, the tendency, unless your resin is thick enough to kind of capture it mid drop, it's going to do what it did here, which is basically fall all the way down, settle at the bottom, and completely hide any of the really cool effects that I was supposed to get with it. So what I did when I was making this one, the clear resin probably sat for about 7 minutes maybe, and obviously that wasn't enough. So what the test that I'm going to do is I'm going to pour resin into each one of these little petri dish molds, and I'm going to let that sit. So and then after about you know, 10 minutes, I think, for the first one. So I'm going to probably, start creating the design, the flower design in this one after about 10 minutes of waiting. This one will be 5 minutes after that. This one will be 5 minutes after that. And this one will be 5 minutes after that. Hopefully my resin won't start to cure before we get to that point, because I do have a 30 to 40 minute working time. But if we look at 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and 25 minutes, I should still be within range of, working time for my resin, unless it decides to do something very odd. But in any case, so like I said, we're going to pour the resin in each one of them so that it starts to settle. But at 10 minutes, I'm going to start creating the design in this piece, in this mold, then 5 minutes later in this one, 5 minutes later in this one, and lastly in this one. And then hopefully that time difference by time, because basically from between this one and this one, we're looking at a 15-minute difference, we're going to have a good idea of what timing is best. All right, so we're ready to get started. I'm about to go put my equipment on now. So of course I'm going to put on my respiratory mask and my goggles, and I have my gloves on already, and I'm going to be turning my fan on. So I'm going to go into a time lapse, and then at the end of it, once I'm done the entire 4 Petri dishes, then I'll come back and we'll review how things are looking, and then I'll leave it overnight so that we can actually take a look at it. And for me, it'll be the next morning, but for you guys, it'll just be a couple seconds, and we can actually unmold each one and see how we did. So it is the next morning, and we're back to come and check on our flowers to see how we're doing. I added these little cards you would notice at the end of the time lapse where I just marked down the time. So it ended up being that I was kind of paying attention to if the resin was starting to thicken or not. And I was noticing that this one here, which was actually the last one I added, I had a bit of extra resin left over, so I decided to add one more in, and then I marked the time, and I was actually noticing that I probably needed to move a little bit faster because this last one was starting to get a little bit thicker. So instead of doing 5 minutes between each coaster, I ended up doing, in each sample, I ended up doing 3 minutes. So 12, 15, 18, 21, and 25. So let's unmold these and see how we did. So on our very first one, yep, so a little bit better, better than the original. So again, let's remember what the original looked like. So this was my original. So definitely an improvement because we waited 12 minutes instead of probably about 7 to do this one. So 12 minutes, this is what we ended up with. In the video, in the time lapse, you might have noticed that these two I actually did really close together just because I was running late on doing this one at 10 minutes and it ended up being at 12. So obviously these two ended up being very similar. Now we have our 18-minute one. Oh, and that one's similar as well. So that one looked like I might have actually put a little bit more pigment when I was adding the resin. And so the 21-minute one is actually pretty similar as well. So we have our 25-minute one, the one that we added. And that one is looking a lot closer to what it is we want it to look like. So you can see there, we're actually seeing some definition. There is a little bit of the resin sitting on the bottom, but it's definitely not as much as what's happening here where it feels like it's blocking the flower. We're actually getting much more definition. So that was at 25 minutes. I do have one more that I created, and it was again with some extra resin, but I had and I just poured it into a regular coaster mold, and this one's a bit thinner. So I was doing to check to see maybe if this one would work, and I just kind of dumped whatever leftover of the colored resin I had in the in those little piping bags that I was using, just to see. So this one was technically almost about 30 minutes. So here you go to see. And again, I didn't actually clear out the bubbles on this one because I literally wasn't expecting to use it for part of this tutorial, but good thing I did, because this seems to be the best one out of the bunch. So if we compare these two, again, we can see probably this is the most closely resembling what it is that we want to, the look that we want. So there we go. So the resin again I'm using is crystal resin, and to me I would consider that like a medium viscosity. Like it's not ultra thin and it's not too thick. So for me to make any of this type of flower, I'd have to wait almost 30 minutes. And again, this again is affected, and I wanted to mention that as well, is the size of your pour. So, you know, these little guys compared to these bigger ones, or even when you get into even larger ones, there will be a slight time difference as well with that. So what you want to do most likely, what I was doing with this last one here, when I was telling you that I was kind of checking it as I was pouring, is I was taking my popsicle stick, and I was kind of like, when the resin was clear, I was just kind of sticking my popsicle stick in to see, you know, how thin it was. It was starting to thicken, and that's how I would know that it was starting to thicken. So if you do that while you're doing your test, you'll get an idea of how thick your resin needs to be in order to have the effect turn out. So again, a little bit of experimentation involved, but I believe, again, like now based upon what we've done here, I know that I shouldn't be doing anything around this time, like between 12 to even 21 minutes. I need to be going closer to the 25-minute mark, or even the 30-minute mark, depending on the pour and the size and things like that. If I was doing a larger pour, I'd probably be closer to the 25-minute mark, or somewhere in between here, because the more resin there is in a pour, the faster it's going to start to cure. So we probably would find ourselves closer in this range when we're doing like slightly larger pieces, and then within the 25 to 30 when we're doing, you know, this approximate size. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, please leave comments for me to let me know that you found this helpful, or that you tried it, or maybe this is a process you're already doing, or, you know, anything you want to let me know. Please go ahead and do that. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, so until the next one, guys, thanks. Take care. Bye.